You are listening to Fika with Vicky on United Public Radio, 107.7 and 105.3 from New Orleans.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fika with our guest today, Dr. Suzanne Karr Schmidt, and me, your host, Vicky Benison. This episode, we are focusing on Chicago's Newberry Library. Their collections, programs, and exhibitions are a portal to more than 6 centuries. Count them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 centuries of human history from the 15th century to the present. Our guest, Suzanne, is their curator of rare books and manuscripts. She's also the researcher and curator for their exhibits. Suzanne publishes widely on unusual printed things, such as, and particularly, Renaissance pop-up books. She is also serving as the director of the Mobile Book Society, and recently is responsible for a fun exhibit at Newberry called Pop-Up Books Through the Ages. Thank you for sharing this wonderful place called the Newberry Library, and for reminding me how much I love pop-up books. Suzanne, welcome to Fika.
No, it's great to be here.
So you became, most kids don't say, I want to be a curator of rare books when they're growing up. How did you become one?
Well, I grew up in Washington, D.C., surrounded by museums and libraries. The Library of Congress was kind of my local library, crazy as that sounds. And as my mother wrote historical fiction for kids, so she was always off doing research. And, I tag along, and then eventually I knew I was going to do art history in some fashion in college and hopefully grad school. And so then I started taking her to places where you could see original artworks, and like Albrecht Dürer, this German Renaissance rock star who realized that you could print things and make a heck of a lot more money than if you just painted one thing. So the power of the multiple. So so we would go and we would look at these original books and woodcuts, and she got a couple of story ideas out of this. And and I was in college and I never wanted to be a professor. So I went to grad school so I could work in museums. National Gallery in Washington, D.C. was, I think, the only place that ever paid me as an intern. But it was sort of starting there, you get to work with putting these objects on the wall. You get to think about what they mean in context. And so I figured that if I wanted to get a real job in a museum, I had to get a PhD. So that's basically what I did. But I spent as little time teaching as possible because I really wanted to work with objects.
To be in there. So when we see that Gandalf meme about what people think I do or what I think I do, you're really in there with the dusty manuscripts and the books sorting through. So it's a very cool job.
Well, we think we know pretty much what we have. The excitement comes when in some cases I am able to add to acquisitions to the collection through gift or by purchase. And then sometimes you learn things about items that have been in the collection all along that you didn't know, and it depends on how you're working with them. Sometimes we have a lot of fellowships where people come in and then they are super specialists on a particular thing, and then they can say, oh, this is very exciting for this reason, can you digitize it for the world to see? And we try to get things like that into the pipeline depending on how many people might be interested. So I spent a lot of time not only adding to the collection and putting things into exhibitions so people can come in and see them there as well as in the reading room, but I also try to find ways that make this collection of books, in my case, it's basically everything that's not in English up to about 1800. So printed books, handwritten books, some prints, posters, about all sorts of things. But yeah, it's usually not, mine are usually not in English.
No, but there is one on King Arthur that I saw there. I'm trying to think of what it was called, and I was like, I should put that up, but I didn't get around to it. But there is, and it just shows that you are always learning as you do this job. I mean, there's so much out there. For the curious, it must be wonderful.
Oh, it's a magical place for that. Yeah.
And so then the Newberry Library was perfect for you because it had the books, the prints, the image, all of those things.
Yeah, I mean, I came to Chicago to work at the Art Institute and in the prints and drawings department there, and I had a wonderful time trying to do exhibitions about what people were actually doing with these pieces of paper. So I was more interested in the signs of use and how people got their hands on literally the stuff than I was in necessarily something extremely pristine. So the wonderful thing about the Newberry is that as long as a reader can come in and page through it in our reading room, it's absolutely fine for the collection. It doesn't mean that everything is a fragile wreck. We don't want that either, but it means the real purpose is for people to get in there and at age 14 and up or ninth grade, you can get a reader's card and come in and look at a book of hours. You can look at, a very modern letterpress poetry, a poster, a broadside, all that sort of thing. So we're really very, very open to the public in this wonderful way that I think more people should appreciate. We're pretty well known outside, in Chicago, and then oddly outside of the US. But then there's sort of a gap where there's this little hidden gem, and people, I don't know, we should be a bigger destination for everyone coming through the Midwest. I think you leave with a new idea of what's important about cultural history and how we got to this point of, memes, visual meaning is coming from somewhere. And good.
I think that the hands-on is just so terrific. People do not understand how important that is into pulling somebody into something. Like, I can actually touch this. This was touched by people thousands of years ago, and I can touch it now. It ties us back in time so wonderfully. And yes, you should be the traveled. I'm sitting here going, I don't want to just be, I want to touch,
come visit us.
Yeah.
Get our hands on some books. No, we had a festival for the first time we tried this year called Newberry Fest.
Oh.
When there were exhibitions, our exhibitions are always free. And so people could come see the exhibits. There were talks by different, by different curators. I talked about Newberry swag, which was an excuse to hand out buttons and temporary tattoos and bookmarks. But we also had a number of books from the 15th century to the present, and people would say, well, I don't really want to touch this 15th century printed book. And I said, oh, but when else are you going to do it? I think you should try. And the paper from the 15th century is so much better than anything produced now. And especially it's more durable because of the linen content. There's a fabric rag in there that it makes it so much stronger. Even, the 19th century paper that's all acidic trees. So, you actually want to go really early if you're gonna go in at all.
I would think so.
So these are amazing objects. As I said, they're just wonderful, and they can be enormous. They can be engulfing in this, and they can show you things about history that are so modern somehow still. Yeah.
Well, even though you said, the rock star who decided that you could take the prints and that was easier than making multiple paintings. Like, the artists at Comic-Con have a lot to thank him for.
Yeah, no, that's so much going on. Yeah, we're trying to get to Comic-Con this year in Chicago.
They would love you.
Yeah, no, I want to offer some tours of special things. D&D groups. We're trying to buy maps and manuals from that. A lot of those are handwritten. We've got some wonderful examples, but we're building that part of the collection because we don't want those things. They're very ephemeral. We don't want them to get lost. My colleague Dave Weimer, their map curator, is really interested in that side. And I've been trawling the collection for historical pirate-based material for a couple of years. Based on on a unhealthy viewing habit of the Our Flag Means Death show. I mean, it's
Is that unhealthy? Is that unhealthy?
There's so many ways that libraries can be relevant, not just to historical moments, but up to the present. Yeah.
Did you ever watch Black Sails on
I'm getting
Starz?
to it. Maybe when I have some free time.
Yeah. It's amazing. It really is. So yes, readers can touch these things, but even people visiting can touch
anyone who comes into the building, it's very easy to get a reader's card. You basically just need to have an ID with a current address. Yeah.
And the address doesn't have to be in Chicago?
No, it's from anywhere. Absolutely.
Oh my God, we have
readers from all over the world. You do not need a letter of introduction. And this is actually quite uncommon for special collections to do this. And I think it's really an important part of who we are. Yeah.
No, that right there is open. So Dave would like to know, what is the oldest book in the collection? Do you know?
I guess it depends on how you define book. I would say something with in a codex bound between two covers, but there are also scrolls are another option of formatting for that.
What's the oldest thing you got?
We have a piece circa, I don't know, year zero-ish of the Iliad. That's on papyrus. That you can't actually touch because it's covered in plexi, so it doesn't shred further. But that's one of the few exceptions. Yeah,
I'm getting chills.
Yeah, it's beautiful as an object as well. We don't have a whole lot of material that's that early. We have some cuneiform tablets, but I'm not sure if they're as old as they seem. So there's some things where we don't necessarily have the specialization. So there's still questions, and we need researchers to come and talk to us about them. Yeah.
So we've got the history that's there that is so exciting and reaches out to us with our modern passions and curiosities, our gaming, our art, our print. Very briefly, how did this whole amazing place get started?
Oh, that's a fun story. So I don't know, so much unfortunately in the 19th century happened with businessmen running rampant across the Midwest. Tail end of westward expansion, railroads, real estate, and Walter Newberry was a businessman in a number of different fields, and he had two daughters who he educated apparently as he thought too well. And he sort of despaired at them ever marrying and producing grandchildren. So he basically put in his will that if there were no grandkids, half of his estate would go to Chicago to build a library. And since there was already the Chicago Public Library, a version of it, that it ended up being a more specific research type of library. And the weirdest part about this is that he actually died at sea. He was going to visit his family in France, and he was well known enough that he wasn't buried. He wasn't buried, overboard, but they preserved him in a rum barrel. And so they figured he was good for it. And so, but they took a little bit of the rum out to make room, I assume. But then they gave him to the family in France. Then they brought him back and decanted him, I believe, and then buried him properly in Graceland Cemetery in Illinois. But yeah, and this was all well before the Chicago fire, so we don't actually know what his library, his sort of gentleman's library, would have been like, because that burned down in the fire. And so we'd never had his books to start the collection. But we had the money, and we have a number of portraits, family portraits that we can see him. I think he's also in a sort of bronze bust on the staircase, and he occasionally gets a top hat for holidays. He's currently very festive, but he has a staff party tonight. But yeah, so we do, and we have some of Julia, the sort of feistier one of the daughters, her diary, in which she has a list of books she loves and people she hates, I think, was something along those lines. So she never, I guess she was a little, she was pretty picky. So yeah, and she originally did die quite young. So I don't know. Maybe she would have married eventually. But I do appreciate her father's willingness to educate, the two sisters. That's important, considering that we ended up being this center for the humanities, in the Midwest and beyond.
So he had that heart. He had that heart for study, and that everybody should learn.
A bit, and enough. Yeah.
More than most at that time, perhaps.
I think so. Yeah.
So moving along, this is sort of the mission, is to get out there and encourage people to research, give them that resource open to everyone equally, taking in history that may not be as open in other facilities, marginalized, hidden. So in that train of thought, you have fellowships that you offer to people. Do you want to tell us a little bit about them?
Absolutely. Most of them are for people who either have a PhD or are academics, and can take a sabbatical year, or just a month over the summer. Also, students who are working towards completing that work. So there's a bit of a bias towards people in academia and in fields where there's a lot of work done on the humanities, languages, history, law, all sorts of things like that. But we are actually building, excitingly, a number of short-term fellowships where you don't have to have all of those credentials. And we have one for artists. We've had that for a few years. Very exciting. We've already bought artist books based on those residencies that relate very closely to items in our collection. And one of them I'm particularly happy about, Emily Martin, did a set of volvels, which are the moving dials that relate to a 1524 book about interpreting the cosmos, sort of your place in the world and the heavens. So it's sort of a little bit of astrology, a little bit of geography, a lot of measurement. But she basically updated some of these moving parts so that they respond to real world concerns of today. And so that's I think a part of our collection now. Just about a year later, we were able to buy one of those from her. So that was wonderful. And she was actually on site during my pop-up book show. So we really, really enjoyed that. She was really, really game. She made, we have this festival called the Edible Book Festival that shows up in a couple of libraries across the country, less so since the pandemic, but where people try to recreate either famous books or books in our collection as food. And there's sort of attempts to make them as silly as possible. And she made tortilla-based volvels that matched the 1524 book, which was just wonderful. I mean, why not have astronomy via snacks? I mean, why not? So that was kind of a great way to bring the community into her research and her artistic process. So yeah, I'm really very fond of that artist fellowship. But we also have ones for writers of all types. I think there's some preference to people thinking about questions of justice and in modern life. And then we just have a new one that no one has had the chance to use yet. That's in collaboration with the Bruseum in Chicago, which is this group working on creating a museum about beer and beer history. And so this is specifically for people with MAs or more who BIPOC scholars, people of color, and we're just trying to get them to come to use our resources, and they'll be able to, whoever gets it this year will be able to do it for a month. It'll be a few $1,000s for the residency, and yeah, we'll see what they can make out of the time here. I mean, I've already worked with the Bruseum crew. They do a lot of collaborations with small breweries in Chicago, and unfortunately, when we did it, it was right before the pandemic. So we had a Renaissance invention themed beer for an exhibition about that. But then the pandemic came, so nobody really had it. But maybe we can bring it back. But I think, yes. But this is to say that historical collections of all times really can lend themselves to this sort of research, especially if we get to sample it. It was a delicious saison with grape must from Sketchbook Brewing, which is in sort of in Evanston and Skokie, near Chicago now. But yeah, so that one, the beer fellowship, the applications are coming up. The deadlines are coming up soon, so that's January 3rd. So if anybody who's hearing this is working on beer history, please look at our website and consider applying. We really hoping to have a good response for our first time out, because that'll help us find funding.
Do more short term
to continue the fellowship for more years.
Yeah, no. And this is what's so amazing about you guys. First of all, your passion is obvious, Suzanne. So this is no boring place with passion like that. But yes, you expect that the fellowships would go to academics, but you're reaching beyond that. And that takes time. You're reaching out to everybody and showing this is not just, for this. This is for fun. This is for fun and learning about life and understanding where you are, and just it's an amazing thing. Now, we've gone ahead of ourselves. I got ahead of ourselves because not only are you the curator and researcher, but you've become a bit of a detective.
Yes, this is a good one.
In finding the lost book, and its home, its original home. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, sure. This was something that happened starting last March. Really sort of took us by surprise. So we get a lot of requests for help identifying books, and we can't do valuations. But we can tell people, this looks like something else. If you want, and here are places that might want it if you want to donate it. We try to find homes for items that people may have inherited from their families and don't know what to do with. But in this case, I got an email from a gentleman who lived in Chicago saying he went on a walk with his dog in the evening in early March and last year, or this year. And they came across a group of 7 books sort of lying on the sidewalk that looked very old and in sort of beautiful condition. And this guy, Bob, dog's name is Sparky, Bob and Sparky, realized that these were really unusual books. And Bob actually was a history major as an undergraduate, and he could tell some of them were in Latin, some of them were in German, and he couldn't figure out what were they doing on the sidewalk. So it was almost night. So he picked them up, putting some under his arm in his coat pocket, and still, leaning down to finish, scooping the poop and so forth as they made their way, and took them home and tried to check with the police nearby to see if anybody had lost them, and nothing. So the police couldn't help. So he emailed the Newberry and the University of Chicago also, just to see if anybody knew of a library in the area that had lost these, and absolutely not. These were not well-known books. They were so rare we could barely find copies of them anywhere. And I still hadn't seen the books, and Bob sent me pictures of the title pages, and I was able to identify what they were, and I sent out a sort of an advisory to an international group of booksellers, and also one in the U.S. that so all their members would be able to see whether or not these were books that they had sold, and nobody came forward with any information. And this is part of the reason this was a problem, is because these books were gorgeous and had markings of ownership going back to the 16th century when most of them were produced, but nobody had put anything recent in them. So there was no name, no address, nothing. And they're just there on the sidewalk. And so eventually we say, okay, it's been more than 4 months plus. I guess no one's coming to claim these. You can bring them to the library. And we did, and it turned out one of them had 3 books in it, not one. as was something that was done at the time. And one of the more important books in that volume ended up being sort of the way that I cracked the case, because when I was writing up an article about it for our magazine, I was sort of searching around trying to make sure that I was interpreting the book the right way. And the accents are very, very fussy in this period. Nobody's, they're not spelled the same way all the time. So the words. So I was looking for other copies of it again, and suddenly I get that exact binding on a dealer's website, and the dealer is in Vienna. And I've bought books from that group before, Antiquariat and Libris, and I knew they were very, very good booksellers. They're amazing things. And I emailed them and I said, well, can you put me in touch with the owner of this, because I think I have his books, and you think you sold it to him. And they told me how to get in contact. And I think just a few days later, we managed to get this lovely 88-year-old man, his name's Marvin, to come in and pick up his books, which he had apparently been taking some archival boxes that were empty and old out to the trash, and maybe took too many boxes and dropped this one, luckily, because if he put it in the trash with the other ones, they'd be gone.
It would be gone.
Yeah, so it actually was very lucky that they didn't stay out overnight to get damp. They didn't get put in the dumpster. And so we brought him into the library and showed him, gave him a nice tour behind the scenes. Looked at some other books that were related to some of his interests, and then at the end, when we were I was trying to talk him in to go to get a reader's card downstairs, he said, "Oh, by the way, do you want these two?" Which I was not expecting in the least, because in my mind, okay, once I identified who owned them, he owned them. There was no question they had to go back. And this is what libraries have to be very careful of, that the provenance is on the up and up, because we don't want to have to argue that we're the owners if we know that that's not true. So and
you just want to be honest.
You want to be honest, and he clearly loved these books so much. I mean, from the first phone call with him, he was describing just from memory what was inside some of them, and I knew they were clearly all his from that description. So it's just lovely. And the two that he gave us one of them was my absolute favorite of the group, with some really, really funky woodcut borders. Both of them are about the reformer Martin Luther, who was kind of a hot topic and around in the mid 16th century when they were fighting Catholicism. And one of the books was pro Luther, sort of in his own words in German. That was the beautifully illustrated one. And then the other was Latin anti-Luther. So it would also showed you in this just two books from the 16th century, people fighting each other on the ideas of what the future should hold and who should be leading the charge on this. So it really, and there was a lot of annotations in terms of who was using the books too. So they were clearly very well read, a lot of the books in this collection. So it was just wonderful to see that who they really belong to, because they absolutely were chosen with care.
And if you want to see pictures of the books, if you want to hear the story again, reading Suzanne's words instead of listening to them, they are in her blog on the November 19th blog on the website that keeps floating around here. But if you just put in, if you just go to your browser and put in the Newberry Library, their website will pop up.
Yeah, you can probably search for sort of lost and found books.
Yeah. No, you did something clever there. You were like lost and found books.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So we have to get it right. So there's some lovely pictures of the books in there. And I almost see this, Suzanne, as a pop-up book, with this little book with these books with scarves around their necks, all huddled, waiting to be rescued, and then finding their way home, and then finding a new, even bigger home.
So these were all
Robin,
relatively small books, but I'm happy to talk about I'm not sure which oversized or giant books. Do you mean something like the Audubon Birds of America book, maybe?
Oh yes, those.
Yeah, so sort of
the,
double
the big
elephant
one.
folio.
Okay, for
Well,
those
that's
that
sort of,
can't see, Robin was just asking about the oversized or giant books from the 18th century. Is there any in the Newberry collection? And Suzanne?
some, yes. I've actually been doing a little work lately on one of our earliest collectors, a guy named Henry Probasco, who we bought his entire collection in 1890 before we had anywhere to put it. We didn't have a building, and he had a set of the Audubon Birds of America, which is something like 60 centimeters tall and it's basically life-size birds. Basically, was the idea. And because the Newberry focused on the humanities, it actually either gave away or sold this book in also in the 19th century, quite early in its career. So I think if you want to go see that copy, you have to go to the University of Chicago now, because it went to the John Curator Library of the History of Science and Medicine first, and that was eventually became part of the University of Chicago. So these books move around, but the same collector had a couple of other Audubons. One is the sort of quadrupeds, so four-legged mammals, which have very, very large colored plates too. So that's a pretty big one as well. He also was very obsessed, seemingly, with gardens. So there's a whole book called The Temple of Flora that's entirely multicolored, printed versions, sort of close-ups of plants in this sort of pre-O'Keefe kind of close-up way that's really, really interesting. And so it's all hand-colored and extremely shiny. And he also went bankrupt from it, so it was very expensive to put together.
But it does sound beautiful.
It's very beautiful, absolutely. And again, yes, scale really, really does a lot. The purpose, the part of the question was, what's the purpose of some of these books? Sometimes, I mean, there's claims on classification, showing different types of birds, different types of plants. But I mean, I think at the end of the day, there's also just the beauty of the scale, and there's a little bit of a coffee table book aspect to them as well, just a little bit.
Yeah, you can just sit there and look at the pictures and dream. That I mean, we sometimes forget the illustrations, but children's picture books have always been. Okay, we'll take one more question now from Dave. What are some of the most controversial books in the collection?
Oh, well, we do transcription sort of events online. A few years ago, we put our Book of Magical Charms up for people to help transcribe, and that's a handwritten sort of album or commonplace book of different sort of witchcrafty, magical snippets and recipes. And in the process, we were able to identify the sort of British lawyer who wrote it, or sort of consolidated it from his own library in the 17th century. But yeah, no, it's something we've had people create music to go with, because a lot of it was in English, and it gives you recipes for, I don't know, curing all sorts of diseases, but with very, very unusual ingredients. So it sort of feels like it's doing something maybe it shouldn't. They're interesting diagrams in it as well, and it was very sort of mysterious for a number of years before we figured out who the author was. But I'm thrilled that we were able to put a name to it. There's still some people. There's still some researchers who think it's doesn't belong to that particular owner, but and they have reasons why, but I think it's
so the controversy is in the authenticity. Not
a
everybody
little bit. It's definitely 17th century. I guess it's just a question of is there just how dangerous is it to transcribe this and read it aloud as well?
Oh, okay. We don't want to summon anything that we're not prepared to deal with.
Exactly. I mean, that's fine if you're prepared, but we don't want to. You got to be ready.
Don't try this at home, kids. Tamara says hi. Hi, Tamara. Thanks for listening to us, watching us. I want to see. Is that book online?
It
The
is
Book of
actually,
Magical.
yeah. If you look up Book of Magical Charms, that one is digitized.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
we should
need
actually.
to.
Yeah, I should mention. I don't know how many old map fans are listening,
That's right.
but
That's right.
we've wonderfully just put a collection of several hundred European maps from I think about 1700 and earlier online. A lot of it's hand colored. Some of it's very rare. There's nowhere else you can see this material. Lots and lots of sea monsters. If you like sea monsters, those make excellent temporary tattoos or real ones. We've had a lot of people make actual tattoos from our collection, which I love to see, even if I'm too chicken to actually get one myself so far.
Heard.
But there's still time. But yeah, no, we really do try to have our collection be as accessible as possible online. When people can't make it in. I mean, we do a lot of hybrid events as well, so in person and live and recorded. So and all that is usually free. So I mean, you can get in and download actually at quite high resolution most of all the things in our digital collections. It's really extraordinary what's in there, and we've had a lot of support to digitize postcards, and we have several million in a big collection that arrived about like 6 years ago. So yeah, I think we have a random postcard generator somewhere on the site where you can sort of click through until it finds you one that's funny and suits your mood. But you can look up in terms of locations, themes. There's really such a wide variety of these sort of advertising postcards. A lot about the Midwest, but not only. Yeah, and we do try to collect a lot about Chicago. Chicago history is one of our big areas. So yeah.
A lot about the suffragettes. I had a great time reading those postcards. I was going to share one on Facebook. Not everybody appreciates my sense of humor, but there were some good ones in there and other political.
Yeah, there are some very off-color actually postcards because it's a snippet of time.
Right.
Yeah, you're definitely that's the thing. We're actually that's something the library tries very hard to do is not Baudelarizing content, but making people aware that it's not our current approach to things. It's not our view, but we don't want to censor it. So
where the world was at that time. How
Yeah.
are we going to see how far we've come? How are we going to see how far we're going to go? How can we understand anything else in that era, the books or anything, if we don't understand? It's not saying it was right.
Yeah,
but
I
was.
think one of the most important ways that we're working on that is something that I think even the Library of Congress is still trying to figure out, is even in cataloging things, especially in our indigenous collections, is there's a lot of outdated language that it's in titles, and we try to take it out of descriptions more and more, but there's just language that is frankly offensive to peoples of the indigenous tribes that are described, or if it's something they wrote. So we try to have discussions with basically stakeholders in this material and try to make sure that we're describing things in a way that is not only findable, discoverable, but is also going to sit well with those communities. So that's an ongoing discussion. It's not going to be perfect, and then a lot of the language stays connected to the records, but we want people to know, not to perpetuate it. So if they're working with our records for that part of the collection, I think they're learning some of these nuances. And those researchers are coming in to work on it, for instance. And I think that's very important that we're doing that work to clarify, what's historical and what's moving forward.
That's like I said earlier, I read a lot of things silently to myself that I would not read out loud, and I am aware that is not the proper way to speak, but it is the way they did speak, and it gives you an idea of how horrible that was. I don't think we can understand the horribleness if we don't understand that it happened in history. It gives us insight. So anyways, more on to fun things. You can send those postcards.
The digital
There was one
postcards, yeah.
particularly in the suffragette section I liked that had the man cooking, and it was, I want something that looks good and is useful. So it was turned around to that.
Yeah, and actually, one of my favorite acquisitions recently, because I'm working on an exhibition about printing on fabric for 2026, so it's a little ways off, but coming, is actually a Scottish handkerchief that it's supposed to be showing what's going to happen in the 1980s, but is in the 1880s, and what's going to happen if women actually get the vote. And so so it's a big white handkerchief, and it's got a great design of women in the army, in the navy, running the politics. They're on the bench as judges and all these things, and men are basically doing nothing, and maybe taking care of the kids a little bit. And it's sort of, this is going to be so horrible. And of course, I don't know, everyone looks really buxom and friendly and having an excellent time taking care of things. And I don't know, I don't see the problem there. So
well, it was just on a side note, that's not what we're discussing, but it shows how much pressure the men were also under, that they should keep their wives
in line
away from this. Yes, I didn't want to say that, but away from that, so it was really interesting, because postcards, I think, well, they're going extinct now, right? With all the pictures that people are taking in that. I'm not sure that postcards.
I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of people who are interested in them historically. They might come back.
Yeah, no, because I was saying that is sad, because it does show the times in a non-academic way, just people on the street sharing these slides. So you can share them right off the website, free. There are some lovely Christmas cards and different holiday cards, and just beautiful art on them. They're absolutely beautiful. Okay, so we're all over the place here because it's my fault. I just want to make sure we get some things taken care of. Well, Suzanne is here. So as far as, we have the Beer Fellowship, and there are some online events as well as the festivals and that. I saw one for December 17th about the German Christmas. You reach out to marginalized groups. It is just an amazing, amazing place. Now, how do you get most of the books? Like, do you get to go shopping? Do you have a credit card, or what happens?
No, everything needs to come through sort of a committee, and up to a certain point. I mean, I acquire secondary resources for the collection too. So sometimes if we have the world's best collection of one particular title, we'll want to know what people are writing about it as well. I mean, I'm not the curator for it, but we have extremely deep Melville holdings, and so we have a lot of Moby Dick ephemera, as well as all the editions. A very, very fun sort of stuffed whale, not literal stuffed animal whale, sitting in one of the stacks. And so you can tell where it all is. I think they're pillows, they're board games. I mean, there's sometimes needing to collect the whole set leads to some really interesting acquisitions. I mean, we prefer, obviously we would prefer donations, but I do have some funds for mainly 16th and 17th century Italian and French books.
That's what you're heading for.
That's what is just historically been acquired. I'm always interested in adding other things that we don't have, like German or Netherlandish things. My work on the Renaissance pop-up book actually led to a lot of looking at German anatomical broadsides with flaps and things like that. So we don't really, as I said, we don't really collect history of science. So we're not buying exactly that, but there are monuments of printmaking, like Andreas Vesalius, who's the first really major work with woodcuts to look at the human body with new eyes, basically. I mean, we have that because it's a monument of art and printmaking. So it really depends, and that's something we could never buy now. It's lucky we have it. But they're just they're very expensive.
Is it getting harder and harder to find these books, or just harder and harder to afford them?
Sometimes it's a question of whether it's something we don't have, but also isn't held in the Midwest. We actually try not to duplicate material that's nearby, because one can assume that someone is looking at every single example of something, they can drive over to one state over and look at the other copy there. If it's it's something that's pretty rare, we wouldn't get another one. But yeah, no, it just really depends. I mean, I sometimes buy things because we're working on an exhibition project, but we also are trying to think more broadly about underrepresented groups in the collection. I mean, I'm more about collecting in Europe than about the Americas, but I'm always interested in books that relate to both, or showing the influence from one way or the other.
I was thinking about that.
That's a mainstay of our collection. We really have deep holdings there as well. Yeah.
So Dave would like to know if you have lots of documents on
the Eastland disaster. Yeah.
Yeah, I assume that takes place in the Chicago area. I don't know.
Yes, in the middle of town on the river, actually. And this was a boat that was being set up for sort of a holiday festival with a particular group of I can't remember if it was factory workers, but it basically was a large group. And when they were sort of being seen off, everyone stood on the same side of the boat, and it capsized right basically at the dock. And it was so unbalanced that they didn't save that many people, unfortunately. The Newberry does have some archival material relating to that disaster. I think if you search if you search on our website, there should be a press release about some of the material that came to us from one of the societies that relates to that. That we did do a small exhibition in conjunction with the Poetry Foundation. Well, was it? No, maybe. Yeah, I think it was. I think was that with the Jun Fujita photography. Anyway, I think we did a show that involved some photography at the time, and also poetry. But that was right again also during the pandemic, so it wasn't very well attended. Unfortunately, we had to shut it down early.
We need to revisit all all of Suzanne.
I know. Get those years back. We say they don't count.
So when you're doing a specific exhibit, you are more inclined to look for books that cover that exhibit.
Well, I come from a museum background. I mean, I did a lot of internships in the DC area while I still lived there, and wide variety of institutions. And and so I do think about collecting in that way, because I feel like it's going to reach the biggest audience. And that way, when you get people coming through, I mean, we had something like 14,000 people come through for the pop-up book exhibition. I mean, part of that, though, I think was because we had a giveaway, and I'm going to show people who can see it.
Oh yes, I was waiting patiently.
Okay,
I have one of these in the mail. I have one of these in the mail, people, but that darn old strike is stuck in the mail.
All right. So what I'm showing is a sort of a die cut sheet that you can punch out parts that build effectively a little pop-up version of the library, and it has a little book hoarding dragon on one side, and amazing maps, and there's even a little barrel in one of the windows for Walter Newberry. And it shows a lot of different locations in the.
Maybe I don't have the most warped sense of humor.
Yeah. So, but actually, when I wasn't even the director of the Movable Book Society at this point when we were designing this, but working with the then director Sean Sheehy, who's on here, and then Hannah Batzel, who did the illustrations. Was just amazing. And you can see there's a little dial that turns. It's sort of a piratey landscape on the front. And you open it up and you see the dragon come out at you a little bit, and it kind of builds the building itself. and you get the wings. There's a little park out front, which you can draw more dogs in if you want. And then you get the little astrological and lunar chain to the top with the sun and moon when you turn the dial. And then there's little books that go through on one of the windows. So you actually can see the first folio of Shakespeare in there that we have. There's some medieval manuscripts. Some are on chains, little girdle book, which you'd attach to your belt, and all sorts of fun stuff like that. So it's all things and locations in the library, plus a little bit of fun. So we really enjoyed sharing those with the world. And I think we printed about 16,000 of them in the end. Thank you, National Endowment for the Arts, for deciding the pop-up book is art. But no, because I think Hannah Batzel was particularly well known on TikTok. So we were able to bring in a whole new group of visitors that we wouldn't necessarily have come in otherwise, because they were interested in picking up one of her artworks literally for themselves and for friends. So it was wonderful to sort of branch that out. And since then, this was in 2003, we had a few left over. So we've been using them in workshops. I sent a group of them to a PhD candidate at Yale who was teaching in a women's prison because they couldn't have online resources, and she wanted to teach them about sort of putting together objects relating to the history of science in the early modern world. And this actually worked for them because you didn't need scissors, because you just punch everything out. You just need some glue or tape to put it together. So that was exciting. But we've dispatched them to all 50 states at this point. And I currently I have a photo of one of them in Egypt, which I'm very proud of.
That's fun.
Yeah, and apparently it was so hot the glue was melting on it, so it barely stayed up. But I'm still waiting. But on the other side, for cold, I'm waiting on a photo of one that I think is currently in Antarctica. So I found a postdoc from the University of Chicago who was going to be stationed there for a few months this winter, and so I'm hoping she'll send me proof that it made it there with her. So I hope when you do eventually get yours, you'll be able to put it together and understand, because there's a lot of detail. And when we were designing it, I didn't even demand a volvel. I didn't ask for there to be a moving part in it. I wanted it to open, and they just sort of gave me a bonus volvel. They decided it needed one, which as the two artists, which I just love that they would say, oh no, it needs to be more complicated. But when we were designing it, there was a question of, well, do you want everything to be illustrated, or do you want just the parts that you're going to see at the end once it's constructed to be illustrated? And of course, we say, oh no, we want everything, because then you have more opportunity to play with items in the collection. So this is one of the most amazing artistic collaborations I've ever been part of, and I just love that it also made people who came to the exhibition think a little bit, because they had to figure out what are the structures that you saw in some of the historical items in the show, which was from the 15th century to the present. How did that translate into this little mini Newberry kit, which you could take home. So I thought that was very successful. Very happy with how it turned out.
And I'm very impressed. It makes me very nostalgic, because being a child of the 60s, that's what we had to play with. It reminds me of cutout dolls, and you would make your own advent calendars and just all this stuff with paper that you punched out, and it created cardboard that you punched out, and it created things. So yes, Dave is saying I need one, and I'm like, it's coming, Dave, it's coming.
It'll be there eventually.
Yes, and when it is, I will show it on the show.
Wonderful.
Robin says, have you ever x-rayed any of the older books to see if there was anything interesting hidden, or to see its construction? So
Let's see, I haven't done that at the Newberry. Let's see. When I was doing my research for my dissertation, I saw a number of books that had was kind of like a fortune telling game in them with sort of dials, and there was an angel on one side and a little Christ child on the other, and it sort of told you where to go in the book. But eventually you needed a set of dice, because even though there was a dial, pretending that this wasn't gambling, you did kind of need to gamble to make the rest of the way through. But I was reading up on these, and a mathematician in the 18th century mentioned there was a copy of this book in a library in, I think, Göttingen in Germany, that had a secret compartment in the binding, which had the dice and some sort of a piece of chalk in it. And I went and I looked at it, and by God, it absolutely, you can open a little flap, and because
there it was,
book boards at the time literally were wood, you could actually carve out a hole in there and put something in there, as long as you had the interior sort of way to get in there, a little door.
Oh, that's even more intrigue.
But no, it gets better, because I was looking at a lot of copies of this book. I actually bought one for the Newberry eventually, although it doesn't have that aspect. But there was one in Wolfenbüttel in Germany that I was looking at, and I was sort of looking at the back binding, and it seemed like there was an indentation. There was a depression under the paper pasted down on inside the back cover. And I was sort of, well, this really, really looks like the same shape. And I asked them, I actually had to leave. My research time was up, and I asked the conservation group there over, in relatively problematic German, whether they could open up the book and send me photos if it had that same type of pocket in there. And I was very surprised, but they were willing to do it. And I was right. Unfortunately, it did not have anything left in there. That would have been wonderful. But it definitely had that same construction where you could put the dice and sort of a little marking implement. So that's probably the most interesting sort of hidden thing I've seen. Yeah.
Well, I find that exciting, actually, and it would be great in a book. I want to say to all the writers out there, you can't look at this website without coming up with multiple story ideas. Okay, it's impossible. You will get lost in it. I did. There's just shiny thing after shiny thing. So, Suzanne, is there anything we missed that you definitely want to get out there?
Well, I think we covered the yes, please come and visit us in person, and don't worry, we'll give you a reader's card part. 9th grade and up, 14 and up, as long as you have a address and some sort of ID. Yeah,
somewhere in the world.
We can help you. We can help you find things to look at too. We're always happy to make recommendations. If you're researching something, you can email reference@newberry.org, and they'll set you up with someone who can maybe even look at a book in our collection for you. Sometimes we send snapshots of things. If people realize that we have the one copy of something interesting, they can we can confirm, is this actually 16th century? Is this later? What are we or are you just looking for, I don't know, all of the 16th century dragons in our collection? I mean, people have had collection presentations. They brought students in to look at books, just an array of things. This was for a theater group. It sounded like amazing. Trying to find them a number of different astrological examples and sort of, fireworks shaped like dragons and things like that. So, I mean, every time someone gives me a quest in the stacks, I'm really excited to go see what's in that book, but also what's around it. So yeah, no, I'm always happy to see what's there. Yeah, I'm currently doing an advent calendar on Blue Sky and Instagram about the Henry Probasco collection from the Newberry, a lot of which is extremely shiny and 19th century, but he had put some very pretty book bindings on some unusual books. You sort of wonder why he chose the books he chose to gussy up, but yeah, no, then the Newberry has a Instagram as well that will really, really give you beautiful examples of things in our collection. So yeah, think about books as objects as well as text and image. I mean, they really, you learn so much from them.
There, yeah. That's what they. Even if they're fun, even if they're pop up, no
Especially if
matter
they're
what
fun.
century.
All books are fun in some way.
Yes,
Yeah.
this is true. So basically, the model is that the Newberry Library is reaching out to with people with this passion, saying, "We'll come to you with your interests, with your research, and let's be friends."
Yeah. I like
Let's
that.
be those. They're willing to be his friends. So it was great to have you, Suzanne. If there's any time you want to come back and visit again and get something across, the door is always open.
Okay, well,
So
maybe next time I have an exhibition opening.
yes, no, it was a lovely chat. So you take care, and we'll talk soon. Okay, I'll
Okay.
email you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye bye. Okay, that was great fun, and I'm so glad I found out about the Newberry. It's just an amazing place. Next week, Thea, the author of The Guide to Pilgrimage, will be back with us, and we'll be talking about the tradition of ghost stories. She's going to once again read one that she's written for Christmas in part. And we'll also just be discussing the tradition. And so, if you want a little holiday spirit, pun intended, join us next week. Until then, may your coffee be hot and your story sweet. Thanks for listening, everyone.